What are we looking at here? A smoking pot and a flaming torch are floating in midair, walking a path between dead animal carcasses. That's not normal. This is actually a story from the Bible, Genesis 15. When Abram sees this, he's completely frozen, unable to move, almost like sleep paralysis. This is a common ritual. It's called a blood covenant. You cut an animal in half, usually a calf or a donkey, walk between the pieces and basically say, if I break this promise, let this happen to me. Everybody in the ancient world was doing this. It's not something that God invented. So to Abram, none of this would be new or weird. He's just like, oh, you want to cut a covenant? Okay, let me go get my shoes. Except in Genesis 15, only this invisible man walks the path. He's the only one on the hook for this promise. This whole episode starts with one of two visions that Abram had in Genesis 15. The story says the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Whatever the word is, it talks. A whole conversation goes down.
How many stars do you think are up there?
Oh, I don't know. Too many to count.
So shall it be with your children.
Children? How is that possible?
I want to give this land to you. And your children.
How will I know?
Why, the floating torch, of course. This situation is like if you went to buy a car and the dealer said, hey, we really need to move this car. So if you call back next week, I'll drop the price 20%. You'd be like, can I have that in writing? That's what Abraham is asking for here, except walking the path was the equivalent of signing the contract. But this particular ceremony got real weird real fast. Normally, a person would walk a path between the halves of one animal, as if that's not weird and scary enough. But God asked Abram to bring 5 animals and cut them in half, except for the birds.
That's just gross.
He laid them out in a way that created a visual corridor of death, an alley of blood. If you were looking at that and you were about to make that agreement, you'd probably be wondering, what am I getting myself into? Can you imagine trying to explain this story to kids? Hey, kids! Yeah, thank goodness we don't make contracts this way anymore. This ceremony was so much bloodier than a normal ceremony. So how bad is the punishment going to be if this oath is broken? But Abram sets it all up.
Prepare the bloody path so I can put you to sleep.
This is not like a normal sleep. The Hebrew uses a special word, Tardemah, indicating a divine sleep, like God put him to sleep. This happens in one other story that pretty much everybody on the planet knows, Adam and Eve. Tardemah is the word used when God put Adam to sleep and took out a rib, or part of a side, a debate for another day, to create woman, Eve. The English phrase deep sleep really doesn't do this justice, because this is not a dream. It's something more than that, more tangible. If it were just a dream, you'd probably be wondering if this incident was real at all. Like, does this even count as an appearance of God? The Hebrew tells us Abram was more like in a trance or a frozen state. He's in the same environment and he's conscious of what's going on, but he can't do anything. God has completely immobilized him. The story says that when Abram falls asleep, a terrifying darkness falls on him. But the weird thing is, the sun hasn't gone down yet. So, unless this story is not linear, the darkness here, it's not literal. Why does the darkness arrive when God shows up? That's the opposite of what usually happens. I checked the Hebrew and found exactly what I was looking for. The Hebrew word for darkness here is a little bit rare, and it can mean supernatural darkness. The terrifying darkness most likely isn't literal. It's a sense of dread felt by being in God's presence. Not the best time to not be able to move, right? And why is God scary this time around when he's appeared to Abram in the past and he's always seemed friendly?
Do not be afraid.
None of my usual commentaries could answer this for me, which drove me nuts. All right, if they're gonna make me use my brain, I'll do it. But just know, this is my interpretation. The theory I came up with is grounded in the text, though. Prior to this story, God had appeared to Abram in Genesis 12. Scholars like Michael Heiser would say God was taking on a filtered form, one that people could see and live. He appeared in the form of a man. If we return to verses 1 through 5 now, we'll be able to see a clue. The word of the Lord in verse 1 is literally called a he in verse 5. This is what Heiser saw. The word of the Lord isn't a voice, it's a person. He wrote, the word here is something that can be seen. Why else call it a vision? Now we can see the story in a totally new way. God, in his filtered form, takes Abram outside to show him the stars and promise him the land. Then Abram leaves God to start prepping the animals for the blood ceremony.
I don't deserve this. You don't need to.
But what if when God showed up to complete the deal, he didn't show up in his filtered form? What if this time, like when he showed up, it was the real deal, like God in his full form? It's not unprecedented. Later in Exodus 33, God walks past Moses, and there, God says, "You cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." So Moses only saw God's back that day. It seems possible to me that the terrifying dread Abram felt from God's presence was the danger of being near God in his unfiltered form. I wonder if part of the reason Abram is immobilized is to protect him from God. But there's another reason Abram is frozen too.
Sorry, Abram. I'm signing this contract alone.
I still can't wrap my head around this. I get that God is making an unconditional promise. Abram's not on the hook for this agreement. He's not allowed to sign. This means Abram can fail miserably and God is still going to honor the covenant anyways. But what I don't get is why God would walk that path and say, if I break this covenant, let me end up like these animals. Why would God take on all that risk? Is there actually any real risk to him? How does multiplying the punishment by 5 factor in? Or is this all a moot point, since God doesn't break his promises in the first place? But the next scene is the most fascinating part of the story.
I have to tell you, your people will be enslaved by the Egyptians.
Oh, please, no.
I promise to save them. They'll leave with more than they've ever had.
There seems to be a pause here in the story while the sun sets. And after that, that's when the torch and the pot begin to levitate. But who picked it up? We know it's God, but in what form? The break before the sun finished setting makes me wonder, did God hang around and walk the path in his full form? Or did he leave and come back in the form he's appeared in before? As a man called the Word or the Angel of the Lord. The darkness could have concealed a man holding these items, or maybe God just showed up in a spirit form, making them appear to float. I suppose it doesn't matter either way. It's still God walking the path in one form or another. But I want to know. If I had to pick one, I like the idea of God inking the deal in his full form. But really, it's just kind of a coin flip. What you don't know until you dig into the Hebrew is that this was a special kind of baking pot that was floating across the path. Dough for bread would stick to the inner walls, and that's how the bread would bake. This would produce a tall cloud of smoke. As God signed the deal, Abram would have seen something like this. From behind, the torch would have lit up the smoke like a pillar of cloud. That might sound familiar to you. 4 generations later, when God leads Abram's descendants out of slavery in Egypt, a pillar of cloud guided the people out of Egypt, protected them from the Egyptian army as they passed through the Red Sea, and served as a visual sign that God was there with them. And guess who else appeared with the pillar of cloud? God in his human-like form. Abram saw God acting out the Exodus before it happened. 4 generations later, when the people were leaving Egypt and they saw the pillar, they would have thought back to the floating torch and the smoking pot that appeared to Abram. They knew what it meant, but this time it was their turn to walk the covenant path. This study blew my mind. I had no idea that almost the entire Old Testament story was hidden right here in this one chapter. I enjoyed studying this a lot more than I did filming it though, because right before I turned the camera on, I got icy hot in my eye. That was fun. I did find some cool Easter eggs, so check it out. The 5 animals God asked Abram to bring for the covenant path, they're the same 5 animals used in Israel's sacrificial system centuries later. And the land God promised to give to Abram, he says it belongs to the Rephaim and the Amorites. Maybe we should look up Rephaim real quick. Great Scott! It's the Giants. The Amorites are also linked to the Giants. Later, the Israelites are going to fight the Amorite King Og to get the land that Abram was promised. And Og was the most famous giant in the entire Old Testament. This blood oath is the setup for the conquest in Canaan. The same manifestation of God would keep appearing throughout the Exodus and the conquest of Canaan. So to see where he appears next, watch this video. And beware the giants. And icy hot.